Hey, if you're like me and every time you start a DIY metal project you spend a few minutes wondering whether that shiny plasma cutter you saw online is actually worth the cash or if you'll end up with a piece of junk that just gathers dust, keep watching. I've been through the whole research undergrit loop a few times, and I want to help you avoid the same pitfalls before you hand over your hard-earned money. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So the machine I'm looking at today is the Fusswhip PLC55. It's marketed as a 1 to 14 mm, 55 amp DC inverter cutter that supposedly works with CNC rigs and even beginners who have never held a torch before. The big question is, does it actually live up to that promise in a real workshop, or is it just another headline-heavy listing? Let's break it down by what matters when you actually plug it in, fire it up, and try to cut a piece of steel for a custom railing or a metal art project. First, the setup. The PLC55 arrives in a compact box with the cutter itself, a standard air hose, a grounding clamp, and a quick start guide that walks you through the basic connections. Because it's an inverter-type unit, the power supply is lighter than the older transformer models you might have seen in a garage sale. You'll need a 110120V outlet, a decent air compressor, around 5 CFM at 90 psi is the sweet spot, and a piece of metal that falls within the 114 mm thickness range. That's all it takes to get to the first cut, which is already a plus for anyone who doesn't have a full-blown industrial setup. Now, let's talk about the actual cutting experience. I ran a quick series of tests on a couple of common materials: 2 mm mild steel sheet for a decorative project, 8 mm plate for a sturdy frame, and a 12 mm piece of stainless steel that I'd normally reserve for a shop with a high-end cutter. On the 2 mm sheet, the PLC55 sliced through cleanly, leaving a narrow kerf about 2 mm wide that was almost as tight as I've seen from pricier machines. The cut edge required barely any grinding, which is a big win if you're trying to keep post-processing time low. The 8 mm plate was where the 55 amp claim started to feel realistic. The cutter maintained a steady arc without drooping, and I could follow a simple curve without the torch sticking or the plasma sputtering. The key here is the enhanced user experience tag the seller touts. The machine has a built-in voltage regulator that keeps the arc stable even when you slightly vary the speed of your hand or the feed rate of a CNC controller. In practice, that means the cutter is forgiving if you're learning to hand-guide the torch, which is exactly the scenario a beginner would face. Stainless steel was the real stress test. At 12 mm, the PLC55 still managed to cut through, but the speed dropped noticeably. The arc stayed consistent, but you have to move the torch a bit slower to avoid a ragged edge. If you're planning on doing heavy-duty stainless work on a regular basis, you might feel the need to step up to a unit with a higher amperage rating. Still, for occasional hobbyist cuts like a custom bike frame component or a decorative grill, it does the job without blowing up your budget. One of the hidden trade-offs I discovered is the reliance on a quality air compressor. The PLC55's inverter design is efficient, but it also means the cutter draws a relatively high volume of compressed air to keep the plasma stream clean. If your compressor is underpowered, you'll notice the arc flickering or the cut quality becoming uneven. That's not a flaw in the cutter itself, but a practical consideration that can trip up a first-time buyer who assumes the machine works on any standard shop compressor. Portability is another angle worth highlighting. Because the unit weighs just under 10 pounds, it's easy to move around a small workshop, take to a job site, or store in a cramped garage. The included handle folds neatly, and the whole thing fits in a standard tool chest. For anyone who needs a cutter that can hop between projects, say, a DIY homeowner who does a mix of garden fence repairs, metal art, and occasional car modifications, this light footprint is genuinely handy. Compare that with a bulky transformer-based cutter that can dominate a corner of your space. Who should buy this? If you're a hobbyist or a small shop owner who cuts metal a few times a month, need a machine that can handle thin to medium thick sheets, up to about 14 mm, and you already have or plan to get a decent air compressor, the PLC55 is a solid match. It gives you the precision of a CN-compatible cutter without the steep learning curve of a professional-grade system. The comprehensive package cutter, hose, clamp, and guide means you won't have to hunt down extra accessories, which often adds hidden cost to a new build. Who should skip it? If you're a professional fabricator who needs to slice 20 mm plus